Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Parenting Your Way Through 2020, a virtual meeting. I'm Michael Lestev. I'm the City Councilman in Bowie for District 1, and I will be walking us through tonight's program. We are joined by several guests this evening, the first of which I will introduce momentarily. I first just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists, city staff, Tamika Washington, my fellow council colleagues and the mayor for joining us this evening. We have had a number of events over the past few weeks and months, and we will continue to have many more, mostly virtual as we continue to ride out the pandemic, to have a lot of these important discussions around the many issues that are facing community members at this time and going forward. That being said, I want to go ahead and introduce our first guest tonight. He is our still relatively new Mayor of Bowie, Mayor Timothy Adams, who I'd like to invite to share some opening remarks. And who is unfortunately on mute at the moment.
I apologize for everyone. That just gave us a moment for a few others to join us. How's that, for Councilman, for a comeback, okay?
That's perfect. Practice politics.
Well, what I'd like to do is just quickly say good evening to everyone. I'd like to thank the Bowie Youth Services and Ms. Tamika Washington for the invitation to participate in this evening's discussion topic, which is so important. And that's parenting your way through 2020. I would also like to welcome the panelists, the parents, and everyone who has joined us this evening. Thank you and welcome for being here. If there's one thing and one word I believe that can truly sum up our current climate, it's uncertain. That would be the word. Over the past several months, the world has been forced to face the unsettling and oftentimes tragic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has ravaged the livelihoods of millions of people. As if that were not enough, we've had to once again face the sobering realities of systemic racial and social injustices that have plagued the African-American community for years. As a parent, I've witnessed the effects of these life-altering times. I've had not only my own children, but the youth in the community and across the country. You know, we've had cancellations of milestone events, prom, graduation. We've seen protests and violence at the hands of those meant to protect them. All of this has understandably shaken our young people in a way many of us couldn't imagine or thought we would ever have to imagine. So as parents, how do we stop the fear and anxiety of what is now the reality, their new normal, as some would say, from penetrating and paralyzing them from moving forward with their lives? What can we do to assist our children as they try to make sense of it all? How do we even begin to start that dialogue? As the father of two recent high school graduates, these questions run through my mind every day. And I think the one thing that I can give to this conversation is that the one thing we all can do is make sure that we listen to our children and that we love our children. And I think that's the most important thing that many of us can do now. And I look forward myself to listening and learning some tips on what we can do for our children as we move forward. And again, thank you for allowing me to be with you this evening.
Thank you so much for those remarks, Mr. Mayor. What I want to do next is give our parent panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves briefly. And once they've introduced themselves, we're going to move on to Ms. Brittany Bunn, who will speak for a few minutes. So first, I just want to say hello to our parent panelists and give them each a couple minutes to introduce themselves. Maybe tell us a little bit about your kids, how old they are, and tell us a little bit about your experience living in Bowie.
I guess I'll go first. I'm not sure if I should jump in there. My name is Ian Nugent. Hello, everyone. I'm the parent of 3 children. My wife and I, Jody, live in Highbridge Park in Bowie. We have a 7-year-old boy, Micaiah. We have a 5-year-old daughter, Soraya, and a 5-month-old named Seth. So I appreciate your pity, and we're doing fine. We're gonna make it. I have a picture. They're all occupied right now. So this is me, my wife, Micaiah, Soraya, and Seth there. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but that's them. We've been here living in Bowie since before any of the children were born. My wife and I were married in 2009 and moved to Bowie in 2011. So we've been here for almost 10 years. Really enjoy it. I'm from Florida. I was born and raised there. My wife is from Jamaica. But we've called Bowie our home now. We enjoy it here, and I'm really glad to be a part of this panel. Thank you.
I think emblazoned on the gold medals owed to parents everywhere is indeed the motto, "We are going to make it."
Yes, indeed. Thanks.
And I believe the Suchis as well have joined us and are here.
Yes, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here. I'm Albert, and my wife is Gloria. We moved to Bowie in 2006. I was in the military. We moved to Maryland in 2002 from California. We initially went to Montgomery County. Then someone dragged us out to Bowie. We found a home, and I really do love Bowie. I've been here since 2006. We have 2 children, a 15-year-old, soon to be 16, and my youngest son is going to be 12 in a couple of days. My wife and I are originally from Brooklyn, New York, and people, they make fun of us being from Brooklyn and fall in love with Bowie, but I do love my backyard. I like walking around the neighborhood, and we're Bowie natives now. So my kids love it. They're here. They're from here. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Some of our favorite residents are from Brooklyn, New York, including not a small number of our elected officials, but don't tell them I said that.
Okay, give me their names. I'll tell you if they're good people.
Were there any other parent panelists that I neglected? I think we have everyone. I now want to transition us to Ms. Brittany Bunn to speak for us for a few minutes about public health concerns in the wake of COVID-19, available resources that she can elaborate on a little bit, and touch on racism as a public health issue. Ms. Bunn.
Thank you all so much. So good evening, everyone. To the Honorable Mayor Adams, thank you for those enriching words. Although I'm not a parent, I think we all parent someone at some times, and I do have nephews who are close and dear to my heart. Councilwoman Harris, Councilman Stav, Tamika Washington for orchestrating this important and quite timely conversation, the esteemed panelists, parents for being the voice of many, and the constituents of Bowie, our neighboring counties, communities, and states. Thank you all so much for having me, as this is truly such an honor and pleasure to join you all this evening. So as Councilman Stavs mentioned, my name is Brittany Bunn, and not only am I a program manager at the National Network of Public Health Institutes, but I'm also a Bowie resident. So like many of you, Bowie is near and dear to my heart. For many, we are in unprecedented times. With COVID raging havoc through many states, communities, tribes, and rural areas, it seems as if every time we turn on the news, we are bombarded with another headline that reads, "New hotspot has emerged," or states and local governors debate on reopening plans. And as parents, my heart truly goes out to each and every one of you. As you work to take such a complex pandemic with convoluted policies and procedures, and you try to simplify it in layman's terms so that your children make sense of why they aren't able to play tag outside, have Fortnite sleepovers if you're like my nephews, and stay up to 4 a.m., hang out with their friends at the mall, or do just the general things that teenagers like to do in the summer, like going to the pool. And in the midst of it all, Black and brown people are fighting yet another pandemic, but one that has not aged, but merely has taken on many forms, and that is racism. And although many strides have been made, similar to the current state of COVID, there's still no vaccine that can mitigate its effects, especially with the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, and Ahmaud Arbery continuing to pierce our hearts. It has become another painful reminder of just how far we still need to go. But there is hope, and that is the beacon we must cling to during these times. In the world of public health, Just know we see you and we hear you. And although I cannot speak for each and every individual within this field, what I can say is that we are committed to bettering society, combating not only COVID, which has disproportionately affected Black and Brown people at an alarming rate, but for the first time in history, the field of public health has declared racism a public health issue, with many states formally following suit. So what that means is that we as a field are not only looking at health equity through a new lens, but working on creating anti-racist policies and trainings, looking at mass incarceration that creates barriers to achieving health equity, addressing police brutality, maternal and child health, life expectancy, institutional and systemic racism in healthcare and policies, health disparities within certain communities, and this is only the beginning. So yes, I understand, and like you, we are indeed in unprecedented times, but I'm a strong believer that it's going to be in these times that will serve as an incubator for the birth of change. Through these community conversations like this, we all can collectively work towards not only speaking of that change we wish to see, but witnessing and giving the kids, your kids, my future kids, all of our kids a better tomorrow. So as we continue this discussion, look at resources, I definitely encourage you to make your voice heard, speak out, ask questions, talk to each other, and really be supportive during these times. Because yes, this is a new normal for all of us, but I am confident in the field of public health in our community that we will prevail in this. So thank you all so much.
And we appreciate your being here and those words as well. I want to give now Bowie Youth and Family Services staff a few minutes to kind of give us an overview of their program, and then maybe discuss a little bit coping strategies that parents can use when facing their own anxiety, and maybe consider sharing some tips on how parents can talk to their kids about what's going on in the world.
Thank you very much, Councilman, and thank you, Mayor and Ms. Washington, for arranging this event. I'm Wendy Wilcox. I'm the director of Bowie Youth and Family Services. We have been around since 1971, and we are part of a network of youth service bureaus that exist throughout the state to provide support for kids and their families in their communities. And we do a number of different things. We were originally charged with delinquency prevention, which is, still something we do, but we also provide general support for households that are having difficulties of various sorts. We provide support when a family member is having a mental health issue, where there is a child in the family that is struggling with that, or whether the child has that mental health issue that they're struggling with. We also provide support for when families are undergoing developmental transitions, or when families are dealing with instances of trauma or loss, and also when people are having interpersonal problems that they need to work out with each other in order to help their families work more in a healthy way. So we provide a number of different services for individual families. We also provide services for the community in the schools, and we have events as well. So we do have a number of groups that run on a regular basis, general parenting groups. We have special groups also for kids that have ADHD and their parents. And Simone Colquitt, who's one of our panelists, runs one of those groups quite excellently. We have groups for kids that are dealing with their parents' separation or divorce. And we also are available for the community when there's an issue that comes up that people need help with, where we have the flexibility to be able to develop programs when the need arises. We also have some in-school groups that we run on a yearly or sometimes twice yearly basis. That includes a life skills group for teens and young adults who are struggling with career and educational decisions. We have a group called Dispute Resolution and Managing Anger that runs both in our middle schools and in our high school annex. We have a mentoring program that serves 47 kids every week who meet with a mentor at school and have the opportunity to get whatever kind of support they feel they need. And we also have a group called a group for young girls who are struggling with career decisions to provide them support, and that also is in the schools. So we also have some special events that we run on a regular basis. We've had a job fair that has attracted a few hundred people a year for the last several years, and that's for youth. And we've had some great employment opportunities for people, including through the University of Maryland and restaurants, areas like Six Flags, as well as some plumbing and other kinds of opportunities for people. So anyway, that is an overall view of our services. Here, we're talking about mental health though. So I want to talk a little bit about what kids have needed in our community always, and then how families are being affected by COVID right now. And our panelists are going to get into that a little more in detail, but I wanted to say that before this pandemic ever occurred, I prepared a presentation for the community that we hadn't yet delivered. And at that time, the facts were this. 1 in 7 of US kids and teens have a mental health condition, half of which go untreated. The number of children going to emergency rooms with suicidal thoughts and attempts doubled between 2007 and 2015, which is the last year that the data was collected in this study. And the other very important point, because I think sometimes we do overlook how much our younger kids struggle, is that kids between 9 and 11 years old made up about 43% of those visits to emergency rooms for mental health emergencies. And according to a study in American Pediatrics, 1/3 of the youth aged 10 to 12 who are seen in ERs for general conditions, not just mental health, 1/3 of those from 10 to 12 screen positive for suicide risk. And so those are very serious numbers, and it's important for us to be aware of sort of where our baseline was before this pandemic, or before, before these terrible social injustices. Of course, they've occurred forever, but before they became so much a part of our conversation, right? So percentage of students who felt sad and hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks. This is just for Prince George's County, 2016, 31.5%. Percentage of students who felt sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more. Students who seriously considered suicide, 17.7%. Students who made a plan for how they would attempt suicide, 14.8%. And it's worth noting that we intervene just as our agency in approximately 65, that's our average for the last 3 years, 65 suicide prevention or other crisis situations involving youth each year. So at a time when kids need us most, there have been fewer providers available to help them. There are actually half as many providers available per person in Prince George's County as in the state as a whole. That is 1 provider for every 801 residents. In the state of Maryland as a whole, there's a provider for every 430 residents. The US average is 301 residents per provider, and that's from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So that was our baseline before 2020. And what has happened in the last several weeks, there is CDC data on this. So I have the last 7 days of June for this. And this is Maryland specific. In the last 7 days, 29.5% of Marylanders have experienced symptoms of anxiety. In the last 7 days of June, 22.1% of Marylanders have experienced symptoms of depression. And if we were to combine those, 33.6% of Marylanders report symptoms consistent with a mood disorder. So that's adults and adolescents, but that tells us a little bit about what's going on in our community. And again, I'm going to emphasize most people that need mental health services don't receive them. So that's one of the reasons why we're so happy today to have the opportunity to talk to the community about what is here for them. People don't receive services sometimes because they don't have the money, sometimes because of cost and availability, sometimes because of social stigma, which we work all the time to lower. But the biggest barrier is actually a lack of awareness of the services that are available. So we're happy to be able to increase awareness through this program. This is a hard time for everyone, especially for our kids. Part of what makes Bowie a great place to live are the many services that are offered through our city. We've really been a leader, and I have to credit our council and mayor for this. We've been a leader in recognizing the value of early intervention when youth and their families are experiencing problems. It makes all the difference. And we're very proud of the support that we receive. And we want you to know that for you as a community, that we're here for you. We have licensed therapists available that have a collective, I actually counted over 130 years of experience between everyone. We are all trained in evidence-based practices, including in the treatment of trauma, which is most applicable at this time. So I want to say a little bit before everyone starts about the signs to watch for. So, and that said, if you have a question about your child or your teen, please feel free to call us in any case. There's no such thing as a stupid question or a problem too small to call about. And if all we do is provide you some information and reassurance, we are happy to do that. That said, one of the things that is important is to be able to look at certain behaviors that might be important to consider when reaching out, and that is physical complaints. So if kids are saying that they have headaches or stomach aches or other ailments, especially if it's keeping them from school, even online school. Social withdrawal, so not connecting with friends or with siblings even the way that they once did. Academic problems, and especially with smaller kids will criticize themselves sometimes, and that's an important thing to look out for. There are some red flags that are important to recognize as well, and when you see red flags, it's especially important to call quickly and get help. And that would be when someone is talking about wanting to die or kill themselves. Sometimes people worry that if they engage in conversation about suicidality, that it will give that person the idea. And that is absolutely not the case. So it's very important to engage in conversation when people hear comments about wanting to die or any thoughts about hurting oneself. Talking about feeling hopeless or of having no purpose, when a person talks about being trapped or being in unbearable pain, or about being a burden to others. Alcohol and drug abuse is always a red flag. Acting anxious or agitated or doing reckless things that the person ordinarily would not do. Sleeping too little or too much. Again, that social withdrawal. Showing rage or irritability. We often see that in teenagers who don't often fit the profile of appearing sad or listless. Sometimes kids seem irritated, and that is the danger sign, as well as mood swings. So I want to emphasize again that we're available for questions. If you're not sure you have a problem, call anyway. We are here for you, and we're here to support you. And thank you very much for your time tonight. I think our next panelist. Okay.
Sorry, was there anyone else at Youth and Family Services who wanted to say a word for a moment?
Yes, our next panelist is Nancy DiAngelo, who will talk a little bit more specifically about COVID-19 and its effect on families and kids.
Nancy, the virtual microphone is yours.
Hello. I'm Nancy DiAngelo. I am the clinical supervisor at Bowie Youth and Family Services. I have been here for 27 years. and we do primarily family therapy as part of our therapy here. Wendy referenced trauma, and that's kind of one of the things I want to start talking about, is that at this point in time, for both reasons, COVID and what Simone will talk more about with the racial injustice, we've all been traumatized at this point. So when we talk about doing trauma therapy, having gone through or going through COVID has been a traumatic event and continues to be so for all of us. It's a very stressful situation. Tonight's focus is on parents first, and then also on helping their children. And my understanding is hopefully there'll be more specifics about different ages in upcoming events. But we, I guess starting with parents, we really have been focusing on self-care some with our clients, because the parents have to take care of themselves before they can take care of their children. You've got to fill your own gas tank here. And firstly, recognizing the tremendous amount of losses that we've gone through, not only illnesses and deaths, but there's job losses, there's separations from family members. You know, some of the sadder stories I've heard is having people in assisted living being quarantined and then passing without being able to see them, which is really heartbreaking for our families. Not being able to have funerals or real funerals for their families. Not to mention the expectations that we've had to, you know, we've had to teach our children at home, which isn't something most people are trained to do. We also, some of us have to work from home and teach our children at home, which is overwhelming for most parents. There's a lot of missed celebrations that the mayor has referred to as well. Graduations is has been a huge event for our college students and high school students. Proms, funerals, weddings, baby showers, missing the birth of babies. All these things, I think that, you know, it's important to just recognize the impact it has on you. And, you know, let yourself experience that, because I think as we kind of run away from all our feelings, that we get overwhelmed, and we really do have to take care of ourselves. And the word the mayor said is exactly what I was going to say, which is the uncertainty is so overwhelming for people. It is so hard to feel anxious all the time, especially as things are unfolding, not knowing what's open, what's closed, what's going to happen, what's canceled. I mean, all of those things have really created a lot of anxiety for all of us. And I think that that's why I referred to it as trauma. And then Wendy's talked about some of the other things I'm going to talk about anxiety and depression. So I think most people have a certain amount of anxiety living in this COVID world at this point. Because of the uncertainty. The isolation is connected to feelings of depression, and that can be pretty overwhelming for a lot of people as well. There's also a sense of lack of safety, you know, not sure if you're going to become ill. The way this is set up, you don't know right away if you're ill or if you're passing it to other people. There's a lot of decisions to be made constantly about what's okay to do in terms of being going out of the house, staying in the house. You know, we've been in this situation for a long time, and we don't see an end to it. So that sense of not having any hope can be really, really stressful. And of course, all the losses I've mentioned. So what do you do about this? Well, some of the things that we help our families talk about is we don't have one answer for this. There is no one answer. But what we're noticing is that having some structure to your day seems to help people. So making sure that you try to stick to some sort of routine, you know, finding, getting out of bed, doing some normal things, because some of our families haven't been able to do some of those things. If they're not going to work, they kind of get into a situation where they're not getting up and doing their regular routines, and that kind of adds to the problem. And I'll get to the children in a minute, but this is all about the adults. So one thing that's important as a parent is to try really hard to find some time to be alone or to recharge, if you have any support at all, to do that. Read a book, take a walk. Some people really need to exercise to help with that anxiety. Exercise is connected to lowering anxiety, depression, so having some sort of routine is good for people. Being alone in nature or alone with animals is really good for people. Meditation or some sort of spiritual practice. And limiting how much news you're listening to can also be helpful. When the news is constant, it really can be very overwhelming for people. So that's kind of finding time alone. But then there's also fighting the isolation piece and connecting. So the levels of connecting, most people know what Zoom is now. Obviously, people are on here tonight, but boy, if we had to catch up. The Zoom programming has gone crazy. And one of the things that people have found is, you know, doing some connecting with old friends, high school, college people, just connection in general. Eye contact, that's why Zoom's better sometimes than telephone. Eye contact is really important for people. They really, really need to look at people. Doing a workout class, taking a college class for fun or credit. Sometimes even binge watching shows is helpful for people. Learning something new, taking an opportunity to cook with your kids, do something different. I had some clients that decided to cook some ethnic food from where they were from, and that was really fun for their teenager because they'd never really had time to do that before, because usually they're at work. Knitting, doing art projects. And then at this point, some people are kind of taking a step out of the house and going out a little bit. So in that situation, then for some people, it's doing natural things, going to the beach, going to the park. And how close you are to people will be up to you, because I think that you have to make that decision based on a lot of factors, your comfort level, who you are exposed to in terms of their risk factors, wearing a mask and walking outside with the friend, but really trying to figure out a way to connect with someone can really help your emotional stability. And then a lot of things, a lot of articles were talking about volunteering, and giving back can really help people feel good. I don't have anything off the top of my head to suggest for that, but you know, trying to figure out a way to do something, whether it's alone or in a socially distant way, can really be helpful for people. Of course, if you don't have people to connect with, then you may want to consider going into counseling, because that is the connection. You know, that is something that you have somebody's undivided attention and their support. And some people really don't have a lot of support here. Wendy mentioned emergencies, and I'm going to reiterate that this is really important to pay attention to. I know people are afraid to go to the emergency room. There is, we're going to show some numbers at the end, but there are also, the PG County Crisis Response Team is a number that we're putting up at the end of this program. And they are mental health providers that come out to help assess people as well as do it over the phone. So if you are unsure about whether you or someone else are safe, that's an easy way to call them and say, this is what's going on. And they will help walk you through it. And if necessary, they will come out to you or tell you to go to the emergency room. So you don't have to decide all those things on your own. that does link to children as well. So if you have children or teens and you're not sure, I'm going to suggest what Wendy did too. You need to ask. It's not going to give them the idea. And also, if they say anything that sounds like they are thinking about harming themselves, even if they're fairly young, we do have elementary school students that have attempted or, or thought about it. So it's not to be taken lightly. Better to err on the cautious side and be wrong, and then maybe it's nothing, than to assume that they're just trying to get attention. Most kids don't just say that for attention. We hear that all the time, but it's very dangerous to ignore it. So, the other pieces of this is reassurance to the kids about, kids tend to be egocentric. So they're worried about themselves first, and they're really worried about their parents. But mostly they're worried about what's going to happen to me if something happens to you. So part of what you can't make them promises that nothing's going to happen, because we don't know that. We never do. But what we tell people to do is really kind of emphasize that they're going to be taken care of, that there's someone else around if something were to happen, that they're going to be all right, that, grandma or aunt or this, we're all in this together. And if I get sick, they can help, and try to help give them a sense of support and safety. Rather than say, oh, I'm never going to get sick. We don't know that. And what we do find is that kids remember that you said that, and then they're going to feel like you lied to them. So it's more important to just help them feel more secure by reminding them that there's other people that can help if something does happen. The communication is really important. We're not going to get super specific, but obviously, you need to be age appropriate with the children about this topic as well as Simone's topic in terms of how much information you're giving them. Just be mindful of having the news on a lot when children are around, because you may not realize they're paying attention, and you may not realize that they are confused about what they're seeing and a bit overwhelmed. And if someone has been sick, even an extended family member, or died from COVID, they do have some questions. This is confusing for them. So it's important to have some open conversations. And you don't have to guess so much about what they're thinking. Just ask them, what did you think about this? Because they'll tell you usually. And it's important to know what's in their heads. So as you talk to them, you'll be able to kind of figure out what they're confused about. Sometimes they are very confused and they put 2 and 2 together and it's not correct information. So being clear, correct is important, and very limited. And if there's something that they ask you and you don't feel like it's appropriate, then you can say so. I'm not prepared to talk to you about that right now, but this is the information I feel like you're ready for. So, encouraging them to share their thoughts and feelings really does help deter some bad behavior that sometimes people see, because if they can't identify their feelings or get their feelings out, then sometimes they start acting up. And this is true for children and teens. One of the things I referred to earlier is about routines. So in terms of your own routine, that's really helpful. But kids need routines too. Maybe their bedtime's a little different in the summer, but they can't go from a structured situation to having no structure at all. Even if it's fun transition stuff, it can be really stressful. It can cause anxiety for them not to know what to expect. So having some structure, even if it's not the same during the school year, one of the things we know is that their whole school year got sabotaged here by COVID. So what they were used to is changed completely for them as well. And they have the loss of seeing their friends and their teachers, and that whole thing got messed up. So adding as much structure in as you can is important, like eating together. It's really surprising how many people don't eat together at all, that their children eat in their rooms. Oh, I'm sorry, my light went out. their children eat in their rooms. They're separate all day long on video games. So it's really important to have some interaction. Having some sort of bedtime rather than being up till 2, 3 in the morning. Take the video games away. I mean, it's very surprising how many people say, well, they're up all night on video games. Well, they can't be if you take the game. You know, you need to you know, shut it down. You know, limiting the video games, and that doesn't mean they can't have any, but you need to balance between indoors, outdoors, something else. Because if it's 100% video games or social media, it's really just not good for the brain, honestly. It's too overstimulating. And it becomes a time where it's hard to interact with them because they can become addicted to the video game, and then they're very grumpy when you want to take them off of it. So just setting up some sort of balance, and that's up to you what that looks like, because I know when people are working all day, it's very hard to entertain their kids. So I'm not going to tell you what the balance is, but you should think about a balance. The other thing to think about is with your kids, rather than just assuming they can keep themselves busy all day, is really trying to engage them sometimes, play games with them. You know, even with teenagers saying, you know, if you're comfortable going through a drive-through together, you know, kind of get them to come with you to do something, even if you're bribing them a little bit, just because it's important for them to have some FaceTime with you. So one of the questions that, as I was reading, you know, of course comes up, and it comes up all the time for us, is when can I let them go out again? You know, when can they just be kids again? When can they play with their kids? And of course, this is a lot longer than we initially thought it would be. I don't have an answer for you with that. I mean, what my understanding is that you have to weigh the risks, and the risks are different for different people. I think it's important not to judge other people for what they decide to do, or blame other parents if they are stricter than you. But if you decide that you're going to go ahead and try to set something up, or even if you decide that maybe they're going to go to daycare a couple times a week, half a day, because they really need some interaction and they seem really depressed without it, then you know, you're going to have to make that decision. If you're doing it with another parent, it's really suggested that you have some communication about what is it that, where are they with all the roles, and can you guys come up with some sort of solution together about how to make the kids comfortable, how to make yourselves comfortable with them playing outside, inside, masks, all kinds of questions. But it's important to kind of have that communication. And it's a hard conversation. It's a little bit like asking whether there's any weapons in the home, I think, in terms of making sure that you feel safe and not be making assumptions that they're doing things that you do, because everybody does have different roles, and also everybody's comfort level is different. So I think that it's important to give them a consistent message if you're going to move forward on doing some activities with other kids. I do know some kids do Zoom play and talk that way. It is a little harder sometimes with young kids. I'm not sure how successful that is. So I do understand why sometimes people really want to get back into interacting. I guess as I'm closing, one of the things I want to say is that it's important to remember that we're all just trying to, you know, get through this together and doing the best we can with the information we have. So I think it's important not to judge each other, and also to be, you know, to be forgiving of your own mistakes, because, you know, you may make a decision and it may turn out somebody gets sick, and you didn't know that was going to happen. So I think that's important to keep in mind, that, you know, you're trying to do the best you can, because there is no blueprint for this. So thank you for your time. And, oh, and here's our numbers. For emergency and the crisis response team, a suicide hotline, and then our number for counseling. This is our temporary number. And then there is a website for COVID as well. And our next guest is going to be Simone Colquitt. And she's going to be talking about how to talk to children about the racial issues that have been coming up in the news.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And thank you, Mayor Adams and the council members, Tamika. This is such a complicated conversation, and that you have the courage to put forth this conversation and invite parents to have this difficult conversation is such a wonderful thing. I'm not sure what our timing is. I want to make sure I'm respectful of the time that you've allotted and the time people have set aside. Where are we with it?
So we're running a little bit late. So whatever you can do to cut your time down so we can get to the questions would be great.
Okay. So I don't want to shortchange the topic because it's such a difficult topic. So what should I put forth first? The main question is, how do you talk to your children about race, inequities, racism? And there's so many parts to it, honestly, but I'll try to give you a really quick run through. I think it's important to start off understanding that you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to get it absolutely right, that these conversations are ongoing. It's a wonderful position to take as a parent when you just kind of acknowledge to yourself and to your child, hey, I'm learning, we're discovering, we're even unlearning some things. You know, taking the position that, hey, look, today I learned something new about this topic, and we can all learn something new. When we invite parents into conversations, we encourage them to be accepting, to be curious, to be empathic, to lead with empathy, to adopt open positions and openness, willingness to explore. You want to foster a parent-child dialogue that's safe, that's comfortable, that's supportive, that's reciprocal. You're giving and they're giving. You want to listen more than you talk, which is often difficult. A lot of times parents want to take the expert role, but you don't have to in this conversation. You can really encourage openness. Expect that these conversations about racism and inequalities and bias can really arouse a lot of emotion in us and between us. So just expect it from the get-go. And with that expectation, you want to remind your children that emotions aren't good or bad. Being validating your children's experience and the fact that their emotional life may emerge as you have these discussions is a good thing. And it's a good thing for us to do with each other. It happens in us. This is some old stuff that's been going on since the creation of our country. So we want to be respectful of that and be able to validate that. If your child is feeling too upset or you're feeling too upset, it's good to, without judging, comfort them, to empathize with them and give them permission to exit a conversation. Give yourself permission to exit a conversation and enter back into the conversation at another time. Every opportunity to talk is an opportunity to connect, not about the topic necessarily, but to connect to the heart of your child. Parents often ask, are they too young to talk about this? When are they too young? Is it when can you, aren't children colorblind is the question people ask. So I'd ask you guys, here's a quick true or false. Children are colorblind, they're blank slates. They can't develop racial prejudice unless they're taught to do so. What do you think, true or false? Another thing people ask, young children talk about race or express bias only because they've heard parents do it or they've heard other people do it in the home. True or false? It's false. Both those things are false. Believe it or not, children very, very early on began to recognize difference at a very young age as infants. As early as 3 and 4 years old, they begin to develop biases that don't necessarily resemble what their parents believe. And they do so. There was a study back in of 3 and 5-year-olds that where they are in a racially and ethnically diverse daycare center. And they discovered that these kids at 3 and 5 years old use racial categories to identify themselves and others, to include and exclude children from activities, and to negotiate power around play at 3 and 5 years old. So if kids are doing this and we're not talking to them about it, guess what happens? They start reinforcing what they're learning in society, right? So to be silent will only reinforce children's biases. They need our guidance. They need our direction. They need our input. By talking to our kids, we help them to develop a positive attitude about race. We help them to think critically. They're not developmentally able to think critically about difference. They may notice it, but they don't know how to discern the nuances of difference and to understand, and attach meaning to it. They try to socialize based on what they think is important in our society. And frankly, our society makes it important. They get messages that these differences are important. So by all means, you want to talk to your kids early. You want to talk to them often. You want to make sure they're understanding that this matters, for you. You want to model behaviors that support your values and that support your how you want an anti-racist society to be and a community to be. And I bet that people who have joined this conversation are people who value that and they're looking to make a difference. It's so important too to figure out what you're going to do as a family. Getting actively engaged in social change is a wonderful thing. And research shows that it makes a difference in a child's self-esteem and their development, whether that social change to you means helping elderly neighbors pull weeds or participating in an election by, going door to door and meeting your neighbors. Whatever that social change means to you, engaging children in those kinds of activities is very important and helps their development. So get involved, do things as a family besides just talking about it. I don't want to be too, I know we're running short on time, so I think I want to kind of wrap it up there with just engaging actively, knowing that you can talk and you should talk, make it age appropriate, like Nancy has said, that's so important. You don't want to dumb down the conversation or back off from it. When we don't talk about a thing, children assume that we shouldn't talk about that thing. It's not that they're not thinking about it, but they want to know that we know that it's important to us, to our community, and to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our counselor therapists for that. It was really appreciated. I want us to be able to transition into our parent panel and give our parent panelists a few moments to ask some questions. I know I've also been PM'd and texted several questions. Some of them have been touched on, but I think two are areas where I think we could expand on if folks will indulge at some point. But let's go ahead to our parent panelists and begin with their questions this evening.
Hold on, Mike, before we go to Ian. Also, for those who are attending, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section, and then we'll raise them as well. Okay,
and just to create expectations, Tamika, what time did you want us to aim for as a wrap up this evening?
Well, I originally thought 8, but we can push it a little longer if we get a few questions, because I want to make sure that it's useful to folks in the. For me, this has already been incredibly helpful, and I think the question and answer will be as well.
Yeah, this is an important one, so let's definitely give folks the opportunity to ask and answer. So I'll invite our parent panelists now to bring up their questions.
I guess I'll start then. Yes. No? All right, thanks. So my question, I'll probably just keep it to this one. It may help. I can rope in both of my questions into one. And it revolves around the issues of race, discussing that with our children. And probably our wife and I's biggest concern is helping our children develop a balanced self-perception within American society. You saw them earlier. We have a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. And particularly our daughter, she's very creative. She's kind of the stereotypical left-handed person. She likes drawing, likes coloring, painting, and all that stuff. But we noticed when she was younger, look here, I actually have some little pictures to show. This is her, some of her creations here. She likes all these things here. So anyway, what we noticed with some of her creations, particularly her drawings and her coloring, that she was not drawing things that looked like her. If you tell her draw a little girl or draw a woman, she'd draw a pretty woman and they didn't look like her. And also, this is actually a picture that she did of our family. And you can notice here, this is her, but this was probably a year or two ago. And her hair still isn't that long. But she drew herself with long hair that goes down kind of and curls back up, a lot like hair that she's seen, but definitely not much at all like her hair. And kind of noticing these kinds of images that we saw from her, and then hearing her directly say she wished she had hair like one of her friends at school. And then, of course, she says Anna and Elsa are so pretty, and she wished she looked more like them. That's been a challenge for us to try to counter these images and her self-perception. So my question, though, is that actually was when she was 3, was when we started noticing these things and tried to take some intentional effort to try to counter it. Actually, if I can just share one last thing, this was probably the most disheartening. When she was 3 and 4, just about every Friday night, we would spend some time together, my son, my daughter, and myself, and I would tell them a story of a little girl. I would just make up another adventure of this little girl named Stacy every Friday night. And it was just a little fun thing we would do. But when we started noticing these things, my wife and I discussed that. I wonder actually what Stacy looks like in my daughter's mind particularly. And so I just Googled little girl images and just said, Soraya, look at these pictures. Which one looks like Stacy? And of course, in my mind, this is what Stacy looks like. But I'm painfully honest about this. This is the picture my daughter touched and said, "This is Stacy that she saw. This is the Stacy that was the star of my stories that I've been telling my 3-year-old for over a year." So to counter that, we've tried to try to do our best to work with that. But then we feel kind of the other extreme of that is having her be vain, because of course to do that we're trying to emphasize how beautiful she is and how attractive her hair is, and look at all the things you can do with your hair, and then showing images of women that have hair like her, girls that have hair like her, and trying to celebrate that. But then on the other hand, we kind of see a challenge. I think it was Nancy earlier mentioned the egotistical nature of kids, and sometimes we kind of notice that challenge with her as well, that, oh, I'm pretty. But of course we're telling her that, but that's not necessarily the attitude we're wanting her to take it with. So I was wondering if the panel could help us a little bit with that issue.
Yeah, thank you for being, first of all, for sharing that with us, and being so attuned to your daughter and your daughter's needs. And I think you're absolutely right. Children get messages about what's beautiful, what's best, what's less from the society that they live in. And they want to conform to, quote, social norms. And in this country, the social norm is based on white culture. So she's not doing something out of the norm. Some of the thing, and she's not necessarily able to extrapolate that there are so many other features that she can, and hold those features in her mind together and make a conclusion about them. right? So if she thinks that white is good, you know, or she gets messages that, good morning, boys and girls, you get a message that only boys and girls are in the classroom. There are people with other genders, right, as well. So kids get subtle messages about what's normative in our society. So good for you to, first of all, attune to your child, and then to help her to try to see beauty other places. There's some pretty good sites. Books are important, I think. Books that have people of color, African American people, brown people, Latinx people, indigenous people as courageous are important. People who are who have done, you know, good things, or just who are central to a story is important to have. So reading a variety of books would be a good thing. There's a website called We Stories that you might want to check out. Embrace Race.
Sorry, that we with a W?
W-E, yeah, We Stories. Embrace Race, Teaching Tolerance are a few things that might be good books to kind of, good places, resources to go to. So I think reading a variety of things, I think it's important for kids to have leaders in their, to be in places where people are in leadership roles and positions of power who are Black, brown, indigenous people, so that they can see that power just doesn't belong to men, or power just belongs to people who look a certain way. They can see a variety of, you know, those experiences. And I think we're very fortunate in Prince George's County and in this area to have a wealth of so many different opportunities to see a variety of folks, you know, in a lot of positions across cultures. So experiencing that and inviting variety to your different people with differences to the dinner table, that kind of thing is important. And talking about beauty from, you know, labeling it yourself. The beauty isn't young or old, and, you know, beauty comes in so many different ways. Paying attention, really paying attention to languaging and how that happens. Does that make sense?
Yes, I appreciate it. And I also do want to give a plug for Prince George's County. The library has been very valuable for us in finding books of diversity. So we're grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to chime in really quick. Although I'm not a mental health expert and I do work in the public health field, one of the things, Ian, again, I want to thank you for sharing that. That is to be that transparent, we really do appreciate it. And just kind of piggyback off what Simone says, one of the things as being a person of color, and what I can attest for is just my own personal experience, is that in the field of public health, there are not a lot of people who look like me. And so that's something that is a norm. If I had to bring out the statistics, that public health is made up of, to be very frank, middle-aged white women. So coming into a field that isn't where people that look like me, who have hair like me, who, you know, have features like me, and even for, as an adult, that can be overwhelming, but for kids, it is so vital. And what I think what really was the saving grace for me is that seeing people throughout my tenure of just coming from a child to adulthood, and seeing people, whether it's in, you know, community engagement and Girl Scouts, and although we are in a time where we don't have those same touch points, but it was so knowing people who were lawyers and doctors, and, you know, having mayors and just people in the community who I was able to identify with. Because like Simone said, you tell a kid that they don't see color. Well, and if anyone who says that, you ask them, well, then how do you stop when you're driving if you don't see color? That's always my, you know, rebuttal to that. But just having some touch to see others who look like me was so impactful growing up. And as you are raising a beautiful, I mean, your daughter is absolutely gorgeous. The more that she sees those people whose hair, you know, whether it's with, right now, I have what's known as passion locks, and I absolutely love them. And they flow all the way down my back because that's the way I did them. But having those moments, and I see little girls who come up and like, oh, you know, can I touch your hair, or can I see you? That's so impactful. We need to see those. And so the fact that you are taking the time out to read to your daughter, to letting her express herself, and to helping to cultivate, never, you know, demeaning what she does see and what she's known to see, but really continuing to expose her, that is so important. I volunteer with Reading Partners in DC, and I've been doing it for several years. And one of the things we are adamant, and so if anyone doesn't know, Reading Partners, you partner with inner city schools and you're teaching kids to get on reading level. One of the most important things that I do is that I always make sure that little girls see themselves in the book. So if you want to be a ballerina, if you're a little Black girl, I will find you a book with a Black ballerina, because I need you to know that it's that moment you'll be able to identify with someone. I want you to have that image, and I don't believe that it's nothing vain about being empowering and embracing the beauty that we are as, you know, just women, just as people, and especially for women. Because not only for little girls, they have to deal with colorism, but then you have to deal with social media telling you about size and this, and it gets worse as you get older. So right here, right now, it's such a formative age, but it's so important to really have her and to say, you know, every day, if you have to tell her, hey, sweetie, you are beautiful. And if she goes, smiles, I know my niece does that all the time. I'm like, you're gorgeous. She was like, you want to look like me today, auntie. And I'm like, yes, I do, because you're gorgeous. But it's in those moments where she can see herself through her own lens, because the world is going to continue to portray, and it's going to take time for we get to a point. But as a parent, I think what you're doing is amazing, and what you're really funneling and really pushing into her. But I will definitely continue to encourage you, like Simone said, get those books, have her connect with other people, other kids, other parents, so that she can see and identify, whether you have short, long hair, it's down your back, whatever, whether you wear it out. I mean, I have natural hair, and when it's out, it is out. I mean, it is huge. But it's in those moments that I had to get to a point where if I walk on stage in front of 500 people, or if I'm with 10 people, I want you to see my Blackness, because that to me is who I am. And that is so empowering. And so I encourage you, I applaud you. And I see in your eyes the, you know, what as a parent, I can only imagine, but you're doing it, and that's important. So I just wanted to share that snippet with you and just say thank you. And I believe that sweet little girl, she is going to grow up and she'll probably be a model, and she'll say, it is because my dad let me express and be who I am. And so we celebrate her right now.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Simone, Brittany, Ian, thank you so much for that exchange. I want to invite the Suchis, if they have a question for our panelists, to go ahead and posit that.
Well, I just want to say that so much great information has been presented today that our questions have actually been answered. So I don't know if you want me to move forward with my question, or you want to afford someone else the opportunity from who's listening, and the option to ask a question. I know we're looking at time. I can gladly ask my question.
I'm going to say, if you feel that your question has already been answered, feel free to frame another one. Otherwise, I have several that I have received. Tamika may have some as well. I leave that to you.
Yes, let's give someone else opportunity, because a lot of great information has been presented and our questions have been addressed. So thank you all.
All right, then. Well, Tamika, did you have one you want to posit for us real quick?
There's nothing in the Q&A yet, so go ahead with your questions.
Let me go ahead and jump in then. So we have several that have been kind of touched on already, but one that I want to focus on that we got was what happens when one spouse struggles to talk about a mental health issue at home, whether it's their own, a child's. What do you do? What are the best practices when one spouse is concerned about a mental health issue at home, but the other spouse just isn't comfortable discussing it or facing it?
I can take that one. So this happens frequently, actually. And the most common reason that one spouse might be less comfortable discussing mental health issues that are coming up would be anxiety, or maybe misinformation, like feeling responsible if something is going on that it's their fault, or other sort of mistaken beliefs. So what we would suggest to a family that's dealing with that is for them to give us a call. And the first thing that we would be able to help with is providing information. Because sometimes when people have information, that helps them see things through a different lens, and helps a problem become more approachable. And so that would be our first suggestion.
That's really helpful. Another one that I have, we've talked tonight about, conversations that Black families are having amongst themselves, but oftentimes we don't talk about what are the best strategies for white parents or non-Black parents to talk to their children about issues of race. Speaking very briefly on my own behalf, I've lived in Bowie my whole life, and I grew up with a tremendous naivete about race, in large part because in my extremely upper middle class neighborhood, there was no delineation of race. My friends' dads were driving Mercedes. They were Black. My friends' moms were Ivy League lawyers. I had Black principals, elected leaders, police. And so it can be difficult, especially in our extremely unique context here in Prince George's, to identify strategies to really talk about race in an important, impactful way. What would you suggest?
Okay, let me make sure I understand your question. So the question is, how can white families, Caucasian families, get into this discussion?
Absolutely.
Right. Well, one thing I didn't get a chance to talk about much, but I think whether a Black family or a white family, we bring this baggage about racism and race and inequality from what the things we've learned or not learned, the things we've noticed or not noticed about racism, about privilege and the like. So we use a tool in therapy called genograms, where we kind of create a map of our family of origin around, and how it's impacting, how they have impacted us, and how we want to move forward in the future around different issues. And racism, privilege could be one of those explorations, right? Where you're looking and seeing, asking yourself, what kind of messages did I get as a young person, or where did I miss, when did I first, you might ask yourself questions like, when did I first learn about racism, right? So, and when I learned that message, what was the response to people from adults around me? How did they respond? Did they shush it? Did we engage? Did they shame? Did they blame? You can ask the same thing about privilege. When did I notice privilege happening, right? And what was the response around it? There are a whole list of questions we can kind of engage around. What our narrative is, what our story is about racism, and then how we want to change. There's some really good books out there on, for adults to think about and to consider. There's one called White Fragility by, I think the last name is DiAngelo, Dr. DiAngelo. There's another one, How to Be an Anti-Racist. It's a really good book to consider and to read. There's some really good things on the websites now about how to challenge yourself to think more, to think differently, and to engage in a productive way.
Those are some really excellent strategies. Thank you for that. And then one other question we received that kind of also relates to both our conversations around race and our conversations around the pandemic. One parent writes, what are best strategies for when a spouse or child, I'm kind of paraphrasing their question because it's lengthy, but what are best strategies when a spouse or child latches on to bad harmful, or just factually untrue information or information sources. There are so many bad sources of information and just outright viral conspiracy theories out there. What do you do when someone in your household falls prey to these, and what are strategies to minimize the risks of a member of your household, including yourself, falling for these?
If y'all don't mind, may I kick it off with just sharing about just kind of resources? So working in the field of public health, I will say this is the first time probably my family actually understands what I do. Because when I said I work in public health, they were like, oh, you're a doctor, great. So I got a cut. Can you please fix it? And I was like, no, I'm going to call 911 like everyone else. So please do not get hurt around me. But I say that to say that there's a lot of mixed messaging. And I know for me working, and especially at the start of the pandemic, I was getting bombarded from friends and family saying, hey, I heard this, and they say this, and you're supposed to do that. And so what I had to do and professionally is counteract those with positive message and like resources and places that are factual. And so what I mean by that is you have to be able to vet the resources, and you have to be cautious of who you're getting, and you have to go straight to the source. So the best place for anyone who is on the line is CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That is our go-to, and that is the place that I would advocate people, when you receive a message, go back and check it. If anyone has ever, did a paper or anything in school, plagiarism exists. So we need to make sure that we fact check the information that we get. We need to follow up with what's going on in our home states and educate ourselves. WHO is another great resource. That's a World Health Organization. They have a lot of great materials that can really combat a lot of those mixed messaging. And so again, I encourage, and I'm so sorry, I have a dog right here who is like going crazy. So as people talk about parents, I am sitting here parenting a dog who's now looking and rolling over. But I say is when you receive those, when it's another spouse, if your kids are coming, my nephews told me everything about COVID. And I was like, where did you get that? And they're like, TikTok. And I was like, wait, first, what is TikTok? Let's start there. But I say that when you receive those, you have to make sure that you back it up with factual resources. So what I did is I sat them down. I was like, okay, let's break this down. Let's look at what is CDC saying about this? What is Maryland? Nancy shared a great resource. What is WHO saying about that? And that's really the best way, is to do a fact check. So thank you for whoever answered the question. I know that's hard. I understand, but make sure you really are checking and you're counteracting those mixed messaging with something that is factual.
And I would add to that never underestimate the power of being a good model. So, if you have a family member that is adapting troubling strategies, it's very powerful for them to see you doing otherwise, and correcting them in the best way that you can. Information is powerful, and those are great resources that Brittany just shared. We also have resources on our youth services portion of the city website, and please like our Facebook page. And some of our materials actually do refer back to the CDC and WHO, so thank you.
And I would just say one more thing, Michael, and just so sorry, but also if people need more local resources, there's a lot of local public health organizations right here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. I work for the National Network of Public Health Institute. There's ASTO, NACHO. They are literally in our backyards, and they are constantly giving out, different resources and messaging in order to talk about these very specific issues, from COVID down to racism, and how to really deal with that. So look at your local sites, and even the City of Bowie has great resources that I've even referenced and said, wow, this is really monumental. So make sure that you are just taking the time out to kind of do that extra layer of research. I know it's tedious, but it's so important to really combat those messaging. And one thing in public health, we're really trying to emphasize, especially as people are going out, and we know people are going to venture out, we want to promote just social interaction, but physical distance. And so that comes down to also with the messaging as well, is what are we telling our community? So that's my tidbit to you all tonight. Definitely focus on social interaction, but physical distance, and we will all stay as safe as we can.
Thank you so much for that. I want to give our parent panelists, Tamika, and anyone else who's written in an opportunity to ask one final question before we begin to wrap up tonight. Tamika?
I don't have a question. I don't have a question.
Go ahead, Ian.
I don't have a question. I just want to express my gratitude to all of you for this. This is really a good forum. I appreciate the information. You taking the time to prepare and to present this for us. I'm very grateful, and I thank you all.
Team Suchi, anything from you guys?
We don't have any additional questions, but once again, I want to thank everybody for presenting such great information, and I hope everyone who is listening in received a good benefit of today's presentation. So, no other questions from us. We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your participation. All right, that being said.
I'm sorry, I just got one question in. Hold on one second.
Okay.
It says, as a single parent teleworking full-time, what are strategies to support distance learning of elementary students who struggle without the school structure and teacher interaction?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is be kind to yourself and to your students. They will not remember in 20 years whether they completed all of their assignments, but they will remember the emotional tone in their household during this upheaval. And so, first of all, if you have trouble getting kids to complete assignments, it's okay if things aren't done quite on the timeline that you'd hope, especially with small children. So that's really the biggest takeaway, I would say.
I also like people to communicate, and I have encouraged families I work with to communicate with their teachers. I'm not going to say they're going to let them off the hook, but if you're really challenged and it's not going well, I think you might be able to get some support there. And also just remember the routine is also important, but like Wendy said, when things are starting to fall apart, which can happen when you're trying to juggle too many things, especially as a single parent, then, sometimes you just need a break. And you may end up telling them that it just wasn't going to get done that day. Because your relationship's really important, and they're very stressed out too, just like you are. So good luck with that. It's a challenge.
Thank you so much for those questions. Not easy topics at all. Probably some of the grittier conversations I think a lot of local governments and a lot of communities and religious institutions are having with their parents and families, but needed. And so I'm really grateful to all of my colleagues and to our counselors, city employees, parents, and residents for participating in these. There will be some more to come. This is a part of a series of discussions that are going to be had around the topic of mental health, which was, as we heard from some of the statistics, already a very serious issue for our communities before 2020, but issues that 2020 has brought into stark relief in even more acute ways than I think we were seeing before. So I really appreciate everyone's participation. And I want to hand us over to my colleague, Councilmember Ingrid Harrison, to give us some closing thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember Stev, and thank you so much for your great job in moderating this wonderful event tonight. I want to thank Mayor Adams for his wonderful words and his leadership. And most importantly, Nancy, Wendy, Simone, you all are just such a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for sharing the information and the resources that the city has. I want to thank our parents, Ian and Gloria and Mr. Suchi. Thank you so much for your insights. And Brittany, great information, certainly much appreciated. Such great insight from such a young lady. So we thank you. And Tamika, thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you for your community leadership. And we just appreciate you and thank you. And we look forward to future sessions. I also want to thank our IT people, Todd Peterson and Anthony Hogue. We just really appreciate all the staff at the City of Bowie. We just feel like we just have a great family there, and we just appreciate all of you. And we just appreciate all of our residents and love you all dearly, and look forward to continuing to serve you. And thank you very much. And thank you to all the attendees tonight. We really thank you for being here and listening to this great information that was shared tonight.
Thank you so much again, everyone, for joining. I think that's going to close us out for the evening. I'm not sure, but I believe on the screen as we close out will likely be posted, and here we have it, contact information and various resources available, in particular that PG Crisis Response Team, that suicide hotline, counseling services, and more information on COVID-19. Thank you, everyone, and wish everybody a very pleasant, safe, and healthy rest of your week.